This is episode 289 of the How to Hardscape podcast, where we talk about how you can start and grow your hardscaping business. And on today's episode, we have Matt Nunn. He is the man behind Margined Mallet on Instagram. And we get into a lot of great topics here. Everything from his craft all the way down to why he doesn't have his contact information on his Instagram and is still able to be booked out. But before we get into today's episode, we want to thank our sponsors. Cycle CPA. And if you're looking for bookkeeping, accounting, CFO services, reach out to Cycle CPA at cyclecpa.com. Let them know How to Hardscape sent you for money off their services there. Knowledge Tree Consulting. If you are looking for somebody to help you in your business, I would highly recommend Knowledge Tree Consulting. They are efficiency consultants in our industry, and you've heard them on the podcast multiple times before. George and Peter of Oriole Landscaping, and George a couple of other times talking about various topics, and we'll definitely have George on in the future to talk more. But you can learn more about them at knowledgetreeconsulting.com. And thank you to Mosier for jumping on board to sponsor the How to Hardscape podcast. I just got my hands on a Mosier 2 Pro, and I'll be using it to measure, draw, calculate areas, perimeters, volume, elevations, and lay out the entire project on my device and for estimating and design process. And if you're looking for a software to dive into, we have the How to Hardscape headquarters software, where we can help you budget, estimate from that budget to recover all of your business costs, schedule, time track, and train your employees with our installation courses, or even use them for yourself. If you want to learn more about that, send me a message at How to Hardscape on Instagram, or go to hthheadquarters.com to learn more about all of the features that we have there. And without further ado, let's get into today's episode with Matt. Today, we're joined by Matt Nunn. He is the man behind Margined Mallet on Instagram, and impressive, beautiful work. Matt, I've wanted to get you on the show for some time now, and thanks so much for taking the time to hop on.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's get started to get to know a little bit more about you yourself, how you got into the industry, and take it away. Just give us the kind of startings of that and how you actually got into this.
I grew up in Southern Connecticut. There's a lot of stonework around here. And so I think I was always a little fascinated by the old walls that meander through New England. I wanted to learn how to do some of that. I was even more fascinated with stone carving and like European cathedrals and things like that, like ancient traditional masonry. There's in the mid 2000s, when I was going through high school, and then into college, there wasn't much in the way of like infrastructure or organizations that I was aware of or knew about to like learn much about the craft. So I kind of ventured off on my own and just like jumped in head first, which had a lot of pitfalls. It's a very difficult craft. Anything in masonry or hardscape is a very difficult thing to just like pick up and try to figure out, especially as a 19-20-year-old, without working for old timers that know what they're doing, which I didn't at first. And I just kind of jumped into the deep end and started trying to build walls, started building patios, walkways, talking to who I could, learning where I could, a lot of trial by fire, a lot of failures, not doing jobs correctly enough for either myself or for the client, or just the way this should be done, and learning that, biting the bullet, doing it again, doing it right. As I continued to go, I geared myself more and more towards natural stonework, and farther away from pavers and block work and brickwork, and eventually became very focused on just doing like letter carving, some small sculptural work as well in granite and fieldstone and limestone, and we have a lot of like politic and granitic gneiss around where I am, very hard metamorphic stones. And then mainly into dry stone walling specifically, and dry stone features, if you will. And that's where I've kind of landed these last 5 years or so of my career, and it's where I want to be and probably will be going forward.
Gotcha. So what is the difference between a waller and a mason?
Um, well, I guess the easiest way to explain it is like to go to old Scotland, and so let's go a few hundred years ago into Scotland, and they had many different specific jobs for masons and people that worked stone. You have your banker mason, who is you live at a banker, and a banker, for those that aren't aware, in traditional masonry is a table that is specifically designed to hold pieces of stone that are being cut by hand. Now, that might just be stone dressing for masons that are going to build, or it might also a banker mason could even do ornamental things like finials and soffits, and even up all the way to gargoyles on the side of buildings and things like that. So it's where a banker mason is someone who has chisels in their hand and hammers in their hand all day and sits at a table, um, and goes at it and taps away, and then and I guess if anything was above that, there was master masons who were in charge of the full on construction and the arches of large scale buildings, and then all the way down, kind of on the other side of the spectrum, um, was dry stone dikers, they called them, right? And that is the old Scottish term for walling. So the difference is really like there's obviously difference with like understanding and using mortars. Chisels are used by masons of all types, obviously, to an extent. Um, but the walling has a different approach to how you'd see a stone and how it would be used in a building, in a construction project. So like when I look at a rock in a wet build application, I look at that same rock differently when it's like how I'd use it, how I position it, how I might turn it, which might be the quote unquote face, if you will, of the stone can change completely based off of the application that you're using. So there's a difference there. Walling it allows me to be outside, and there's a free flowing aspect of it that I've found that I like. I don't have to worry about mud. I don't have to worry about weather as much. It's just you just kind of go.
Absolutely. I mean, do you prefer using mortar in your applications, or is like a waller just basically doing it dry base as much as possible?
So I have no personal preference as to what I like aesthetically for myself. Like I love masonry, so I like all sorts of things. I enjoy personally building without mortar more than I do with mortar, because it's just you just can find a rhythm that's really nice, and I'm just a big fan of it. I think when built right, a dry stone wall can move with the ground. It can stand the test of time. There's something more natural about it in a way. At least it speaks to me. So I personally enjoy mortarless work, or doing mortarless work more.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So take us back to when you were first starting out. Was this like you first started out with pavers, retaining wall, manufactured retaining wall product, and then transitioned into more mason side of things? Or was that like sort of hardscape pavers, retaining walls, supplementing to the point where you could become like a full-time mason?
Hmm. I think it's a little bit of both.
Mhm.
Um, I think for me, I did some fieldstone walls, some like really rudimentary, rough rebuilds of like perimeter or roadside fieldstone walls early on. I got a couple of those, and kind of cut my teeth in those a little bit. But I wasn't by any means like picky towards what kind of hardscape work I was getting at the time. So like I loved the idea of trying to figure out how to do walkways, which building a walkway, whether it's with pavers or bluestone or flagging of any kind, is way more. There's way more steps, and it's more complicated. You need more tools. You need to have a better understanding. You need to, you don't even need a level when you're building a dry stone wall. Like I don't even use levels. Like I haven't touched one in a couple of years. It's kind of the nature. Your eye, if it looks good to the eye, it's probably good enough for for most dry stone walls. And so like they're very different in terms of how you go about them. Like, and I was definitely drawn to like learning how to construct a good, nice patio and walkway, and then steps and staircases from there. Um, so I think at first it wasn't that it was just supplementing, it was that I had a curiosity and an itch to scratch in the whole spectrum of like American hardscape. And I found that block work is much, to me, it felt much easier. I got bored with that very quickly because, they're the same. And the beauty of natural dry stone walling is like every rock is different and you're putting a puzzle together. And I love that. It like keeps me slightly challenged at least throughout the day. So I transitioned away from like retaining blocks and like block work walls pretty early on, like within a couple of years of doing this. I still like the look of some of them. And I still every once in a while drive by ones that I did 12 years ago and they look great. Like so like that's nice. But and pavers, I was taking paver jobs that like I was into or that I wanted to take at least up until just like 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. So those I kept doing. Walkways, same thing. I was doing those again up until 4 years ago or so, and then it's just I think I had such a creative drive for walls and for like fireplaces and specific types of natural stone construction that I eventually got good enough at it where I didn't have to do anything besides that thing that I wanted to do. So which has been really nice.
So your education in installing was all trial and error basically, or did you look to
Pretty much.
anyone? Yeah, pretty much, eh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, would
To an
you recommend?
extent, I'll say to an extent.
Yeah.
I in my late 20s, and this is where social media has been amazing, is and I got on Instagram when I was 29, 30, and it was the first time I all of a sudden got the chance to meet more than just the few Masons in my town.
Mm.
And talk to guys like Mark Arsenault up in Green Monster, up in in New Hampshire, and like and one of my best friends is Bryce Hollingsworth in Massachusetts, and like Mike Corsi up in Maine at Terrapin, like these guys who like right when I like saw what the operations they were running, and like that they and I got the chance to like get to know them. I'm like, damn, like this is great because I'm just a 29, 30-year old guy at the time, like who's working out of an old 92 Chevy, like just kind of showing up, didn't bring a level to the job. So you know what I mean? Like that's so like for me it was like, and then I go to these guys and they know all sorts of stuff. They know things I never heard of, and they know people, they have access to materials, they awesome jobs and equipment, and they have an understanding of how to run jobs. And so there was a lot of like so yes, I taught myself the details of the craft, how to go about building, how to go about cutting stone, which is something I considered a specialty of mine for most of this last decade. I is using my tools, um, but like that's a limiting part of like trying to make it as a businessman and as like a full-time craftsman in this trade. So like the things I learned, and I'm not saying that I haven't learned a lot of craft from a lot of these other craftsmen either, because I have. I would say I've gotten better over the last 5 years since I got on social media and met some of these guys and got to connect with people all around the world and not just New England. I've gotten better in these last 5 years than I did in the 10 before that. Um, and yeah, that 10 before that was pretty much just me. I had a couple guys working for me, but they didn't know any more than I did. So it wasn't, we were just, forging our own way. And we did okay. We did okay. But like getting to connect with other guys and collaboration in general is what allows for the best work in our industry to get done. And that's something I think that goes back in time forever. You know, the coolest things that were ever built in stone were not done with a couple by a couple people. They were done by an army of people, you know.
Right.
So
Um, Going, yeah, I guess back then, how long did it take for you to be comfortable with selling a client on specifically masonry or walling work before you were like very confident in your skills, your ability to do so?
quite a while. I guess when I think back to my mid 20s, even being several years into the industry, I still never felt fully confident. And in like it's at that point, even a year or two in, I felt confident that I could get the job done.
Yeah.
But it was more like, how much is this actually going to cost? And that part, I don't think I started feeling confident about that until just a few years ago.
Right.
I think I had 10 plus years of kind of a hope and a prayer. And I found it very, I think where I have always struggled is recognizing the logistics of certain job sites and certain like how's my access and what happens, oh, and I have to factor in like what happens if the weather's really bad these next couple of weeks, and or like what if I didn't quote the amount of stone correctly, and that's a huge thing that very one of the most common things for people that are building walls or sitting, whether it's sitting walls for around a patio or any type of walls or any type of construction in natural stone, is figuring out your stone costs. And I think the vast majority of people, I don't want to say consistently under bid that or whatnot, but because people do figure it out, you live, you learn. But like we all have, every one of us has,
Yeah,
and like
absolutely. Or you go out of business.
or you go out of business. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But or you live on ramen for a year. Like it's, it is what it is. But that's the bit been like one of the big things. And if we're talking about like when did I get confident with like that, 3 years ago, maybe.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And most of these last, up until the last 2 years, I was just doing sub work for a few years with a lot of these guys that I've met through social media or through someone that I met through social media, which has been really cool. And that's something that I love with like our community is I love that there's not very much gatekeeping
Right.
anymore. And I feel like when I was growing into this, like, and it was just a small community, like the Masons around me were in my area were like seeing some of my work and they were like, it's pretty good. Like, we don't like this, you know what I mean?
Right.
And like, who's this threat? And then I'm like, I don't like that mindset. I think that's a
Right.
scarcity mindset. And like, I think we all serve each other better if we try to like build each other up and share our knowledge and share our time even. I think what happens when we do that is we can build a better work quality and a better community. Like it brings awareness to what we do to clients so that they know, so that they have a better understanding. Like, I want an outdoor space, but I don't know what it is that I want, and then, okay, well, now if we're not gatekeeping things, then we can help them figure out what it is they want. And like that can only serve everyone in the end of things because there's enough work to go around if we just, I don't know, we just,
Band
help each
together,
other out.
right?
Well, yeah, we
Yeah,
would band
yeah.
together a little bit, at least a
Yeah.
little bit,
Yeah.
but
Do
anyway.
do you still find that that's the case with local people, or is it like what I'm trying to ask is that the difference between people that are online versus like offline, they don't go online at all and form that community, or do you find that more and more local people are becoming more and more embracing or I guess accepting of one another?
I'm finding a little bit of that. Like I'm seeing the half glass, the half glass, the glass half full here with this. Just recently, like I've been doing a couple big jobs about 30 minutes from where I live now, and I hadn't done any work in this town or even the couple next to it before. Most of my work had been like the other direction for many years, and I'm right on the road. One of my jobs was right on the road this past year, and like I had this mason stop by like early on and into the job, and he was just like, had been there for a couple of weeks. There was a good section of wall up, and he was just like, yeah, I did these walls like up the road, and I'm doing like a little patio, literally like 7 doors down. He's like, dude, your work's amazing. Like this is so cool to see. And he's working the same damn rock on the same road for a I'm basically, and I was really like, I was like, fuck yeah, and excuse my language, but
You're good.
I was just like, hell yeah, like, because this guy totally could have been like, oh, who's this coming into my,
Yeah,
territory, and that's a potential future client of mine that just got scooped out from under me. But instead, he was like, what are you doing with these, like, the way you're finishing this wall, and like, is this all the stone that was like here before that I had seen? And I'm like, and we're like, yeah, and we ended up shooting the shit. Like, we ended up getting a beer together like couple weeks after, and like, we're buds now. And
nice.
like, I hope to work with the guy in the future and vice versa, because there's work, he's got work, I got work. Well, if we all can be like cool and friends, like, if I need a hand real quick, like, hey man, like, can you give me a couple days? Like, I got a deadline. And like, having people that are friendly, that want to help, you can return that favor, and that they will. Like, we can do things like get jobs done faster, make clients happier, everyone can make more money, and like, have a better peace of mind and better client relationships, and have jobs just go better in general. And when doing so, like, here's the real secret of it all: we can kind of barter for work if we all do that too, which
Right.
is like, we can all save a little money to spend at the end of the year. But like, so I think there's a lot of benefits to that, like, having a positive mindset, to having a curious mindset, and to not like, we're all going to see something that's like what we do and be like, oh, it's natural. It's a natural human emotion to be like, oh, how does that compare to what I do? Or like, can I do that? Or like, there's going to be feelings that are like the first feelings of insecurities and the first feelings of feeling threatened. Like, those are going to come up. It's natural. Everyone's going to feel that way. That's okay. Like, recognize that, move through it, and realize that there's more positive ways to, like, go about bridging this dynamic, and allowing those feelings to like pass through you, because they're not important. They're just natural things that come up. It's like, you're not actually threatened. Like, we could have this could be a real good thing. It's not
Right.
like this could be a bad thing. It's like, hey, this could actually be awesome.
Yeah.
And so I think that's and I'm digressing a little, but back to what you asked, like, I think because of that guy and a couple other instances these last couple of years, um I've seen from guys that aren't on the online guys. He's not an online guy. And I feel a little like, um I'm feeling good about that, and like,
Yeah.
better than it was, I think. And that being said, there's, of course, there's going to be some that are just going to be threatened, and that's that. But it's hopefully they're getting weaned out in a way, like they start recognizing they're the minority. If everyone else is banding together and still has open arms, like, then
Yeah.
maybe I think they can come around as well. So.
We want to take a break from today's episode to thank Mosier for sponsoring. I just got my hands on a Mosier 2 Pro, and we'll be using this a lot this year for our estimating and design process. It is a measure and capture device that will measure, draw, calculate areas, perimeters, volume, elevations, and lay out the entire project on our device. I'm going to be bringing it on every consultation to measure the dimensions and elevation of the entire project, export it to my design software, and have a working terrain map to begin my designs from, as well as to become more accurate in my quoting process. The Mosier 2 Pro is going to save me a ton of time and from having to make rough hand notes while taking these measurements in the field. Instead, Mosier does all of that for me. If you want to get your hands on a Mosier 2 Pro, use the promo code X8Hardscape. That's X, the number 8 Hardscape at Mosier.com, or simply click the link in the show notes. Now back to our episode. You've opened up so many avenues for me to ask some follow-up questions here. I'll kind of go off of what we were just talking about though, and you did mention earlier, people that worked with you. I'd assume employees, and then you mentioned, working with other
Mhm.
local guys as well.
Mm.
These days, are you more so working with whoever's local with you in kind of like a subcontractor model, or do you have employees? And yeah, how does that work there?
I am by myself. I've run pretty much only my own jobs the last year and a half or two, outside of a handful of sub jobs that I've gone in as a subcontractor on for some guys around the country. So
Yep.
I'm getting to the point where like I'm getting enough of my own jobs. I enjoy going to work by myself a lot right now, which is where I am in life right now. Like I have a kind of what most guys in the hardscape industry would consider a crappy mini excavator. I got a couple trucks, I got my couple trailers,
Yep.
I got a little mini, and like I can go. I put my headphones in, I listen to like different types of books or podcasts, and like I get in my zone and I build, and like I don't like too many distractions. And I'm very happy at this stage in life and in career doing that for the majority of my time. Um, so I have no full-time employees. That's probably going to change within a year or two, but I'm pushing that off as much as I can right now. Which means sometimes saying no to certain jobs, which I don't love doing that either. But that's what it comes down to. It's like I got a call yesterday, for example, and they talked me through it, and they're like, so I'm hoping I can, you think you can come out and like check it out this week? And I'm like, I can. And they're like, okay, cool. Like I'm hoping to get it done by like, April by like and I'm like, okay, you mean April 2026? Like, because like maybe, but definitely not April is in like in a couple months, man. Cause so I'm booked out far enough to where I'm losing jobs. I'm like, here's another number. I give him another guy's number, like hit him up. I don't think he's going to be available by April anyway either, but like we'll move this down the line like until someone finds it like, oh, I got an opening for you. But anyway, so that's making me think like, okay, maybe I should start getting some employees soon, but I'm going to push that off for another season. As far as what I do though, and what I love is I love getting subs on myself as well. So, and I don't do it very much, but it's really beneficial. I feel like you really maximize guys' energies a lot, and I know this from experience because I've been like a super sub for people for like 5 years now, for most of my last 5 years. Is like call me up, get me there for a week or two, and then I every time I do that, I just show up and I'm just like, all right, I'm here for 5 days. Like I'm gonna get done as much as I can. Like I wanna help them out. Like so and so has booked me a nice B&B or put me up in their own house or is like and cooking me dinner every night or whatever it is. You always treat subs get treated better because they're there for a shorter amount of time, and therefore they're motivated to like go harder. And so like everyone wins in the situation, and obviously you end up making a little more as a sub than like a full-time employee a lot of times too.
Right.
um there's more costs, like, and there's some downsides, like I spent years on the road, and uh my old lady doesn't love that. Like so like there's downsides. Obviously, a lot of guys that have kids, like that's not really feasible too much, at least not
Right.
too often. But I enjoy doing that. I got a guy coming down next week, who's a good waller, a great worker. He wants more walling experience, and that's like what I do 5 days a week. Uh, so like he's coming down and spending 5 days with me next week, and we're gonna go after it in the single digit temperatures out here and have a time. So
Gotcha. Um, do you ever run into especially when you're a sub, uh, guys that install differently and they look at how you install, especially when you were maybe just first starting out, um, and maybe ha didn't have the reputation that you do have now, where there was maybe some butting heads, or has it been fairly like flawless in terms of that?
well, I think I feel like my experiences have been very lovely with this,
Mm.
personally. Um, I I also I've definitely feel like I've been a job site therapist at times.
Oh yeah.
So like I can speak to hearing a lot about the contention within workers and employees and builders and craftsmen that work next to each other all the time and have different approaches and different thoughts. And like, um, I don't let, I haven't, it's been many, many years, Mike, since like I've had a point of contention in stylistically with other people. And I think a big part of that is like when I'm going on to someone else's job, like first hour is me picking their brain, inspecting the work that's already been done or is getting done, or if I'm showing up at the start of a project, picking their brain on what they want done. But I always go into it having already studied their work, so I have an idea of their style. Because my goal is
Right.
not to come in there and put my foot down and be like, I'm here and this is the way this is going to be done. That's not it. That's the complete wrong way to go about anything. You don't want to go in and be like, well, so and so does it this way, so this is the right way. Like, so and so isn't here, or who cares how so and so does it? Like, whose job is it? Who is there an architect? Is there a specific design? What does the client want? And if none of those things are on the table, whose job is this, or who are the other craftsmen?
Hmm.
So, like, when I'm getting on a project and we got six dudes there, I want to have an understanding immediately of what they're going to be putting out because it should all blend. If
Right.
it's natural stone masonry, it should not look like it's been done by 5, 6 different dudes. It should look like one person did this or a bunch of people with the exact same approach.
Hmm.
And that so like blending is very important. Blending your work style and isn't I would say for anyone out there who is wanting to do more sub work or is starting to do sub work, my that would be my probably my biggest advice is like go in, keep your ego at the door,
Hmm.
and your number one thing to do besides show up ready is and like be ready to work is to like try is know and recognize, learn what's going on, who's running the job, what they're looking for, and blend with the other workers. Do not try to stand out. That is not your job. You will do your best. You will look the best and be the most appreciated if you do not try to stand out. You bring positive, good energy, good work, good work attitude to the site. You lift everyone up. You try to keep people moving. And you want it to be a team. That's what you are. And it might be a makeshift team for a week or a day, but like you're part of a team unless they're specifically asking you, can you come on, show my guys how to do this? And I have had that a lot too. So like I that does happen. Like I've had plenty of situations where I'm like, I want, I'm hiring you, I'll pay you a little extra. Can you come and like lead this job and like have my guys who are maybe a little greener in this specific thing, like I want them to see how you do it, or I want them to do it your way. Like, so that's completely different. But if that's not communicated, you're a part of a team and your goal should be to blend. It's very important.
So that brings you kind of answered it there, but hypothetically, if you were to go to a job site where somebody's already like built part of a wall and you're coming in to complete it, um, and you didn't try to blend if for whatever reason maybe you feel like it was inferior, would you be able to notice?
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sure you would be able to notice if you were to, do it your way.
Mhm.
Would somebody else looking in that
Yep.
is green be able to notice that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if someone else looking in that's green, maybe, but definitely other craftsmen will that are like specifically not people that know what they're looking at. Like
Yeah.
absolutely. And some of the first times I ever did sub work, um, that happened to me. Like I went into a job. It wasn't a situation where I was jumping in on a job that was like already half done or anything. It was a new job, but I took one side and instead of like continuing to check the appearance, the aesthetic, the quality, if you will, the whatever, the how the other couple guys there were walling.
Yeah.
I just like hyper focused on my area and did the best job I could. And like I remember being like I felt like I was doing so good, right? Like I felt like I was in a great flow. And then I remember a guy who I really respect, who's 10 years older than me and is a very, very talented mason, like all around mason. he like hit me up like at the end of that, and I had posted pictures like, and he hit me up like at the end of that week and was like, I know where you worked. And I was just like, damn it, and I was like, that's not good. And he's like, that's not good, Matt. Like, he's like, it's too obvious. Like, and he's like, and I'm like, how bad is it? He's like, I would expect a client would be able to think there's a difference between one part and the next. And then that's not good. Like, because if the whole thing looks the same, that's going to look better. It's going to look more balanced than if one section is worse or one section. I'm not even saying if it, whether, say I was doing a worse job, so to speak, like that would the same concept there. If I'm doing a worse job or a better job, it's irrelevant. You got to be trying to match.
Mhm.
So uh, I think, and then when I've worked with some guys that are green, and I've also had a couple situations, man, where, and this was another big learning experience for me when I was first doing sub work. I had guys who were pretty green walling with me and working with me who got very frustrated because they felt like they um, weren't able to keep up in like pace or quality or one of those two things.
Right.
And to the point where like they got really frustrated, not like angry at me, obviously, but they got really it got them down. So now they're like not feeling good about themselves, and they're not they're like doubting themselves going forward with this craft.
Right.
And like that was another moment of like I got to do better. Like that's the dude had built like three walls in his life. I'm on like my 103rd, like, and he's 8 years younger than me or something. Like, of course. And that's why eventually, like, we went out and got drinks like the next night or something. And I was just like, I had to talk. I'm like, hey, man, that's on me. That's not on you. Like, that's, of course, you shouldn't feel down. Your third wall ever is way better than what my third wall. You want to see mine? I had to rebuild it. It was so bad it didn't last more than 4 years. So like like and I that's what that had to happen though, because like it was that was on me though. Like I screwed that one up, and instead of balancing and blending, um I pushed the envelope maybe a bit too much. And I think there's a balance of that, like showing people what can be done, and like providing good leadership there might be a fine line between that and pushing people a little beyond what they're ready for. So
Mhm.
you need to find that balance. But
When it comes to when you're thinking about hiring somebody, um, are you trying to find somebody that has some sort of experience, or are you trying to find somebody that is green that you can teach them the way that you do things so that you don't really necessarily have to worry about blending if you are bringing them up from no experience?
hmm, that's a great question. I've gone back and forth on that.
Hmm.
Um, I think I think there's no real right answer. Not to be
Right.
just too ambiguous with it and give you no answer, but like I don't think there's a right answer with that, because I think there's pros and cons to each.
Hmm.
Um, I'll say in time I would like both, uh, because I very much value guys that have experience in the craft and just in general in working environments as a tradesperson. But I also um, I get geeked like working with young dudes who are like really fresh into this, and like they're like 23 and they're just like all about it and they want to learn. They're like, this is so cool and I want to do this. And how do you do this? And I want to learn. I'm like, hell yes. Like, because like, they're like, they've got guys like me, and they know about the Stone Trust, and they know about like all these things, and they have access to social media. Like, they have all of this information that I didn't have, and they're using it. So it's just
Hmm.
like, to me, it's just like, there's some guys, and there's a couple guys I've worked with who are between 20 and 23, 24, who are pretty green still, just because you are at that age, but like they're already insanely talented.
Nice.
And they're like I can't wait to see just like what they end up doing, like what the shit they're gonna end up building, how good they're gonna be, how much this is gonna feel natural for them. They're like knowing that they don't have to go through like the same bullshit that I went through is really wonderful, right? So I do love like the idea of bringing in like some young blood, so to speak, and like bringing them up the way I, under my wing and the way I see things. So I like I said, I think I'd like to have both because also like when you have an employee, whether and this is what's nice about a lot of subs is like I get some subs here and like there's most of the guys I get here, I'm like I could literally just send them to a job day one and they know what to do and I don't have to worry about it. Like
Right.
they're responsible, they can run a job, they can build really well. So having a guy like that I think is invaluable. You've got to keep them happy. They come with pride and more needs a lot of times. So like there's that, but I think that's always worth it. Almost always worth it. And I'd like to have both.
We want to take a break from today's episode to thank our sponsor, Cycle CPA. It's crucial to review your financial statements on a monthly basis so you can diagnose areas for improving your business's financial health early before they become significant issues. Too many contractors wait until the end of the year to review their financials as they file taxes, when it's often too late to take action to change the outcome. Cycle CPA not only handles bookkeeping and taxes, but they also ensure that you're armed with financial data on a monthly basis to make key business decisions. They offer benchmarking, cash flow forecasting, and assistance in developing targets for financial metrics. With their team of accountants specialized in the hardscape and landscape industry, they currently work with hundreds of companies in this field. Visit cyclecpa.com and for $200 off, mention the How to Hardscape podcast. Now back to our episode. You mentioned how far you are booked out. How far do you usually try to be booked out? And are you comfortable with being booked out, especially for, client expectations and everything like that?
I get a little anxious if I'm booked out for less than like 4 months or for
Mhm.
less than like even 4 to 6 months. I'm comfortable booking out as far as 18 months.
Okay.
Um, Mainly with I'm because I'm a solo guy, Mike, and I definitely have more of a feel of like the lone guy in his old pickup than I do like this professional businessman. And I think that people hire me, they're not hiring me for deadlines most of the time, like to hit a specific deadline. They're hiring me because they really appreciate some finer aspect of the art within the craft
Yep.
that like they believe I can provide and or that they see within my work. So like because of that, I'm afforded I think a little bit of leeway within scheduling. So like I'll tell someone, all right, I think I can be there May, but I might hit you up in April and I might be there in August. Like
Right.
but I got you. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
and like, I'm in a position, and I don't recommend being that. It's not
yeah.
considered. Most people would not consider that professional or like, doing a great job. But it's dry stonework, man. All types of natural stonework, all types of hardscape. Like, it frequently. We're masons. Like
Mhm.
we almost always cost more and take longer than anyone thinks. Like let's be real. That's just
Yeah.
like that's forever. That's been going on forever, man. Like it's not going to change. Like we can be as diligent and as like, oh no, we're going to stick to the deadline and this is that as we go on. And like in certain situations, we can do that. If we really get gun ho, like we can do that, and it's great to do it. Travel jobs, I find it super important to do that. Like if I'm
Oh,
going
okay.
to, if I'm going to Kentucky and I got a job in Kentucky, like I gotta do everything in my power to make sure like I don't want to be there for that extra week because that extra week or two is a lot more extra money and it's a lot more time away from home.
Hmm.
If you're getting put up like, and I have done jobs that are I can't even come home on the weekend because I'm too far away. I do a lot of jobs like that, and when you're in that situation, you're paying for B&Bs, hotels. You're paying for, there's food stipends that have to be factored in. There's travel that has to be factored in. And you should be doing those jobs with other dudes, so that you can get it done. Like otherwise if it's a small job, like, oh, if a guy in Tennessee has a 2 week job, like I'm not gonna take that. Like that doesn't make any sense. But if it's like a massive job, we might put a team together and go knock it out. Well, that team, if we got several guys coming from several places, it's got to be, and we say it's going to be 3 weeks, it damn well better be 3 weeks because other people are putting off other things for it. So,
Right.
like, there's more responsibility for that. But, like, for me, working alone, if I'm home, it's, there's more flexibility for me and with what I do than a lot of other guys. And I haven't been building patios for a while, as I mentioned. So, it's been 5 years since like I did a job where someone was like, "When we're gonna have a wedding here in like June or whatever," and then so it needs to be done by that time. Like, so I'm lucky enough. I'm very, very lucky and privileged to get to do jobs that most of them don't have deadlines, and most of my clients appreciate the the artistic aspect of what I'm trying to bring to the table. So.
How do you manage your schedule especially when you're doing travel jobs? Is it something like you agree that you're going to be there on this date, and regardless of where you are in your current project locally, that you just put a hold on that, you communicate that to the client, and you go off and do that, and then come back to that current project? Or do you try to time it in between projects? I'm sure that gets really difficult,
It
especially when
does.
there's multiple people
Mhm.
involved in that type of travel work.
It does get difficult. And yes, most of the time, travel jobs get booked out very far in advance.
Hmm.
If they're real ones, like we're booking them out months in advance, months and months, sometimes a year or more. Uh, and therefore, like, I can build my schedule around it because I usually know it's coming. Or like if I'm okay, well, I'm ready to start. For example, my next travel job is a few weeks in Indiana in April and so in a few months, right? And I've known about that for 3 months, I think, or
Hmm.
something like that. And I knew it was coming for a year and a half. We locked down the dates like a couple months ago, the
Right.
exact dates. Anyway, I took a deposit for the next big wall I'm doing, which is local here. I took a deposit for that like a month ago, I think, a month or two ago. And that'll be getting started in like March. So, and it won't be done until May sometime. So, in the middle of that job, I'm going to be going shooting off on a plane to Indiana for 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
Um, so, like, I told the guy, I think I can start this in March. Um, I have a travel job that I have already committed to in Indiana. Like I will not be here. I will not be able to come to your house on Saturday even and like check on anything or move anything. I will make sure when I leave for that job that like the site's okay, but like it will not be done before then. And I will finish it. I'll pick right back up and finish it when I get back.
Gotcha.
Um, and are you okay with that? Like, if he's not okay with it, then we have an issue. But
Hmm.
like, because it's like, okay, well, I have committed to this thing, so I can't work around you with this job. I have to do that. I'm going there with four guys. We've all locked that in, and we did it many months in advance. So like, that's the way I have to do it.
Hmm.
It's really just comes down to communicating. I see no problem most of the time with being really open with my clients. About my schedule and about like the flexibility within timelines of things. I tell them like this is going to take probably between 4 and 6 weeks. Like I don't know,
Right.
like, and that's how it is. And I think people most of the time respond really well to the openness and the honesty for me. So.
Gotcha. What about if it's like a really cool travel project, you want to do it, but you're already booked up, like you didn't have time to communicate this to the client
Mhm.
before they signed up? Do
Yeah.
you take that to the client and let them know that this has come up?
Mhm.
Do you just like dictate that you're going to go off and do it, or do you ask them for permission? How do you handle that?
I would definitely not just like go and do it without conversation. I wouldn't even in my own head be like, I'm gonna have to find a way to do this. If I was super interested and something came up that was super important. In fact, like I just got a call like a week ago. This client is finds herself with a terminal illness. This potential client, I had never talked to this person before. And she just called me a week ago and she has a terminal illness. She's probably not going to make it for another 6 months, right? She has this like grand idea. She's always wanted this very specific stone sculpture done. And it's not a single rock sculpture. It's like a large scale build sculpture, like a
Mhm.
construction sculpture, right? Part of a monument, if you will. Um, Not in like a cemetery, but in like an open space that borders her property. Anyway, she's got this whole design and she's had it in her mind for years and years and years and hasn't found the right person to be able to do it. But she's like, I'd like that done. I she's like, I know I can't ask for it done before I pass because I might pass in a couple weeks. I might pass in 5 months, but like I'd like it done by like the solstice, the summer solstice, and that's important to her. And I was like, okay, well, I'm booked right now through August at the earliest. Like August is my first real opening that I see in my schedules, and I told her that, and I'm like, this is really important to you, and this is obviously a situation that's unique because she's passing too, and
Right.
like, so I feel immediately like, I mean, hell, if we build in stone, that means something to us, like someone passing, because like, what are we doing? We build in stone. That means we literally, if anyone that builds in stone was at least partially attracted to this craft because of the timeless, like never falling apart aspect of stonework, like the fact that it stands the test of time, the fact that it is longer and longer lasting and sometimes bigger than a lifetime, if you will, in a way. It can transcend a lot of things. And it's very much connected to death. It always has been. Let's be real. Stone has always been connected to death. Uh, so this one hit me pretty hard, and I was like, okay, well, you know, I'm now currently right now in the process of like talking to some of these future clients. Like I just mentioned, I have this travel job booked that I'm not going to move that one around. It's only a couple weeks, so maybe 3 weeks, so that's not a huge problem. Um, Talk to my current client who I have future work with a little bit that was booked up. They're flexible. They're completely cool with it. And the next client as well, the next couple that would get in the way with this are all very understanding as well. So it's one of those, this isn't about, this one didn't scratch like the artistic itch. It's not like someone in California hit me up and is like, we're trying to recreate a tiny section of Machu Picchu. You want in? Like if someone did that, I'd be like, I'm like, yeah, I do, I do. Like, let's see what I can do. And I'd literally, I would go to answer your question more directly. I would go to my clients and be like, hey, next week I'd like to fly to California and do this and do a week on this really cool site. Are you okay with me missing a week here to go like scratch my artistic and creative itch? That's how I would approach that. And most clients I've worked for these last few years, I'd feel comfortable going to and asking that. But that's how I'd 100% of the time would do it that way. I wouldn't just like send them a text, be like, not going to be there next week. Peace.
Yeah.
Like, see me in California on the Instagram.
Yeah.
Like, like I wouldn't do it that way, but I would go to them and be like, hey, like this cool thing, like this cool chance, I'd really like to do it. I just wanted to run it by you. Like, are you comfortable with me like being gone for a week or two
Mhm.
here in the like on a whim? Um, and then we go from there. But like this one that I brought up is obviously a little more kind of intense. It's not something that maybe, although it would be a very challenging build. It's not a situation that is like, it didn't resonate with me because it scratches my creative itch as much as it resonated with me because it's like of its importance to someone,
Mhm.
right? Because usually I'm building walls and it's like, okay, like we can pretend that it's like all this, a lot of my stonework is really important and all that, but it's like, you know, it's just a fucking wall, man. Like, it's if you were building a whatever, building a fire pit, it's like it's just a fire pit, like it's just a fireplace. We can we can get ahead of ourselves and think too much of what we're doing sometimes. But like this is one where it's like the way she expressed it to me is the life dream of hers. Like, and
Hmm.
she's had this design for decades, and now she needs to find how to get it done. And she didn't even find me on Instagram. She like heard me word of mouth from a guy who had seen some of my work in person. Um, just to kind of, and she's like, I haven't seen your work, but this so and so gave me your name, and I'm like, oh well, here, like, and she didn't have Instagram, so she like had her daughter like look up my work or whatever, and she's like, she's like, oh my God, you are the person, like you can do this, and it's like okay, well, hell, I guess we'll get this done, and I don't know what's gonna happen because like I don't think she understands what she's asking for is like a gigantic project. First of all, I don't even think I could. If I would have to drop everything next month and start this thing to get it done before the solstice. I don't know if she understands financially what it is, but we're probably gonna. I think she's gonna have to tone it back, and that's just all details that aren't important right now. But being able to go to my clients and like say like, hey, like this really important thing for someone came up, and I think it would mean a lot to her,
Hmm.
to people, to for me to like slide a month of my schedule around. Are you okay with that? Like, is something that I'm in the works of potentially doing right now.
Gotcha.
Uh, yeah. So
We want to take a break from today's episode to thank our sponsor, Knowledge Tree Consulting. They are efficiency consultants in the industry with 35 plus years of industry experience building Oriole landscaping in Toronto, which they are completely hands off at this point. George and Peter have been on the podcast before, and George, on multiple occasions now, I've personally leaned on him to help with the How to Hardscape headquarters software and how we can maximize the efficiency of user experience. And I know the guys at DTE Landscaping, Chuck and Jeffrey, who we've also had on the show multiple times, have hired them on in the past. Check out their consulting services, peer groups, and events that are coming up on their website, knowledgetreeconsulting.com, or check them out on Instagram at joinktc. Now back to our episode.
Where do you find these clients? Like you mentioned that one was through word of mouth. Somebody just happened
yeah,
to see your work, but in general, where are these clients coming from? Because I asked that, and I had that in my notes here. I
yeah.
asked that because you don't have a link at all to your
No.
website in your Instagram, and I actually find that very somewhat common with a lot of
Mhm.
you Masons,
Mhm.
especially with a larger following on Instagram.
Mhm.
Um, where,
Yeah, I
yeah,
don't.
where
I
do you,
don't have a website. I
yeah.
don't have a website. Um, I I honestly, most of my clients nowadays are finding me through Instagram and sending me direct messages or emails. Because I think my email's linked. My email might not even be linked. I don't
No, it's
remember.
not. I tried I
It's not
tried to
linked. You're
find
right.
it there.
There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah, I get a lot of messages for it, and learning to sift. You know what? This is actually why I took my information down, because at one point, a less than a year ago, Mike, I had my phone number up there, like clickable, and my email. And it was, there was too many time wasters, and like too many people calling me or texting me or sending me emails about projects in all over the place, like literally from Australia to Japan to Norway to Russia to like literally like it based anywhere, you name it. And like I was getting hit up about these projects and like, can you do this? And then it's just like, no, dude, I can't run a job in New Zealand like in a couple months. Like I can't do your job in New Zealand. Like there's like so many visa and tax problems with that. And just no. And for so many reasons, no. But and then all the ones in the States too. There was plenty of time wasters in the States. So at least like, they can send me a message. It goes into my message requests. And then I get a sense of it a lot of times, like the validity of it, the worthy, like, is this worth me putting a lot in? A lot of times what I do is, and I don't want to say this happens like every day because it's not that crazy. There's not like, I'm not getting that many, messages about potential jobs, but like frequently what I'll do is like someone will hit me up in Oregon. So let's just use that for example. And um, like, I'd really love like to have some of your work around here, for example, or at my place. And then they'll like, I'm like, oh, cool. Like, like you're interested in good stonework. Like, what kind of project are you looking for? And they'll give you like, oh, or send me a picture of the area, for example. Like, there's a lot of ways I might go about it to like put a feeler out there. And if I get the sense that like immediately, like, oh, they're looking for like a retaining wall to be built, and it might be like a decent sized retaining wall, but like, okay, if it's a retaining wall looking to be built, um, I'll be like, okay, well, here's a couple masons that I know of that live within a couple hours of you. Um, and I know them, and I can speak to the quality of their work just by talking to them on Instagram over the years, or like I've some of them I might have met if they were in the area, because I've worked with a lot of dudes from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast, and or just like I can see their pictures and know that they're freaking good at what they do. Um, so I'll either do that, or if it's like one that looks really legit, then like in terms of like, okay, this might be like a real, like a travel opportunity job. Like if it's a 50-foot retaining wall, then let's pass that off to a local mason. But if it's like a huge job, then maybe we take it to the next step, which would be like, okay, here's my number, here's my email, here's my number. Let's do a video call. Let's do whatever. And go from there. And then if they're really serious and everything works to that point, then clients have to be ready to fly me out on their dime. I would like you know if it's during a weekday or a weekend, like I need to be paid a subcontractor's day rate just to be there, to like go out of my life for a couple days. Pay me for a couple days of being around, of being out there, of discussing this, of going over the site, and pay for my travel, pay for my hotel room, and that's got to be part of this. The I do free quotes. Like, I'm not going to charge anyone to estimate a job, but I'm going to charge you to fly me out to Utah to estimate a job. Like, that's obviously has to be factored in for the client. So like each situation is a lot different, Mike, and it really comes down to like vetting out a lot of people are also just like trying to pick my brain and wanting to know what's doable or how much something will cost. And I'm like, I'm not gonna tell someone in Portugal how much a wall costs, like, because it's different there.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
and so I don't know. It's there's a lot of funny. I got a lot of funny messages, and then yeah. So I like to just keep it to the Instagram. I think that's probably why a lot of us do that, is like we've been bombarded with just too many time wasters. And I don't want to sound that like mean, but like time wasters just refers to people they're not interested in actually having something built by me, or
Mm,
or whatever. So
gotcha.
anyway, yeah.
In the future, will you put that back on, like a website or contact, or is it just that, like at this current point in time, you're just overwhelmed with work, it's coming in, you don't really have to worry about it?
I don't know. I think maybe in the future I'd put a website on if I have one. I do not have a website, which is otherwise I think a website if I was to have one. And my girl is a graphic designer, so like that's I have I have the means of having a website pretty quickly if I when we're ready. And she's talked about this winter about potentially making me one. So like a link for that'll probably go up before I think about putting my contact information back up. Um, so and then from there, like having but you got to remember, I don't have like a legit shop. Like, I'm such a small guy in the business, like in the trades. Like, there's so many companies around me that have multiple trucks, they have logos, they have I don't have any of that. I have unmarked trucks. I don't have a logo. And I don't really want to change that, because I'm not trying to sell anything other than the quality of my work right now. Um, I don't really I don't know. I don't mean to. I understand why people do that. Obviously, I think it's very important. I think there's a lot of large businesses that get a lot of really good work done around me and everywhere. But for me personally, I think what works right now is staying small and specific and picking and choosing the jobs that I want to do.
Yeah. I've always liked the idea of like it's hard to get a hold of you basically, and it helps to definitely wean out those clients that are just trying to prick your brain or don't quite know what they're getting into. And the people that do are able to reach you. It's um they're definitely the clients for you. It's kind of, I don't know if you know Bill Murray, but he's got
Hmm.
this like 1-800 number that you leave a message if you want to get a hold of him. And it's basically impossible to get this actor as a somebody on your on his film. And that's kind of how what it reminds me of.
Cool. Yeah, of course I know Bill Murray.
Do you have like 15 more minutes here, Matt?
Yeah, yeah.
I just have so many more questions for you, and this could be maybe if you'd ever want to come back on the podcast, I could ask you many more questions here. But
Cool, man.
you have mentioned pricing projects.
Hmm.
Has that evolved over the time that you've been in business? Did you start like pricing um, hours, time, and materials, and move to a different method, or what's your sort of thought process on pricing these days?
Um, there's jobs I do time and materials. If I can't get a good understanding uh of like what something might entail, um, especially for me, it's I feel pretty confident with most types of builds doing a square footage cost, like a price per square foot of construction. For most things I do, there is some things that I think that gets it. I don't even want to say dangerous. It can get scary for both the client and for our work. Are you familiar with the big moon gate that I built with Mark?
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that
We've had
was
Mark on
just.
the show before. He's a
I,
great
I
guy.
thought so. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mark's wonderful, a wonderful dude to know in this industry. Um, well, when we built that, I remember him and I were sitting around before we ever took out a tool. We were up at his place in Dover, New Hampshire, and we were talking about it. The clients were like, kind of want a moon gate, and we were like, Mark called me like, in the summer before that and was like, can we build them a moon gate? And I'm like, we can build them a moon gate. Like, I don't know I think I know where we could put it. And he's like, I think so. So we went over like where we could do it. And then him and I were sitting down, and we had decided we'd both draw up designs and not show them to each other until I got up there, and then we'd go over that from there.
Gotcha.
So we drew up these designs. We were remarkably similar on the designs, which was really cool. And and then we were like, okay, well, how the hell are we gonna? What do we do? Like Mark, and it was Mark's job. Mark was dealing with the clients are amazing. I know them well too, but it's Mark's job. I've gotten to know them because they're just such nice people. Um, and Mark's like, what do I do? What do I about like what do we do in pricing? Like how do I go about this with them? And I was just like, I think I know the square footage number that might work, but like it's kind of sounds crazy, and like it's just a big number because and he's like square he hadn't even thought, he's like square footage number, he's like how do we even what and I'm like, yeah, I know, because it's like it's not that many square feet, but it kind of is if you think of like every revealed face. Those stones are huge, the inside, the outside, the both front and back of the walls that support it and all that. Um, and I remember we did it out. I'm not going to say the number, but like we did it out if like what that would probably come to math wise if we did it at that square footage, and then we were just like, no, screw that. Like Mark just went to him and was like, hey guys, we don't know what this is going to cost. We're gonna make it. We know what it's gonna look like, and we know how to do it. We don't know how long it's gonna take, or how much like it's gonna cost. And I'm gonna go through. And Mark had a great pile of stone like at his shop, and he's like, I'm gonna choose every single one that is the best for this. Like, there's no saving of anything, so to speak, for later. Uh, and the clients were just like, that's okay. Like, we trust you, Mark, and do what you need to do. And so, which was really cool. So like, because we weren't confident that we were giving a fair number for ourselves or for the clients. We really had no idea. So we didn't have to give them a number, and that was really awesome. But that was a great example of like that was the last time I did a job where I wasn't like really sure of the outcome. And it turned out, Mike, that like that square footage number that I thought originally was pretty damn close to what like we ended up doing for a time and material.
Gotcha.
And like
Can,
I find that to be consistent nowadays.
gotcha. Well, can I ask if it was higher or lower? Whether
We
it was
were
like close?
the number I had done turned out to be like 6 grand lower
Wow.
than the total cost of the whole project, including walls and steps and everything. So like it was I think it was like 6 grand. It was really which was really close. We're talking like a couple days, a few days worth of maybe 2 days worth of labor for like the
Wow.
4 guys and the machines that were there. It was not that bad.
Yeah.
And that like and I wasn't thinking about like what the square footage would be. I'm just like I have in my head, I've done so much damn stonework that I'm like, well, the X quality stonework should be this, X quality
Yeah.
should be this. And like you go all the way up and it gets exponential quick, like, in a way, not exponential, but like it feels like that, right?
Yep.
Um, like the closer you get to sculptural, and that moon gate is not as much. It's dry. It's completely freaking dry. It's crazy, but it's not as much a piece of dry stone walling as it is a sculpture.
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
so so that's I've my last year since the moon gate. I've every project I've done by the square foot. I've done which allows them to get a an idea of around cost. It also feels really easy for me when I write up a contract, and my contract just says all stonework done is to be done at X amount per square foot. Sign here, sign here. And then
Right.
when the client's like, you know what? Let's build that wall a little taller, or let's
Gotcha.
build another 15 feet. I'm like, okay, that's fine. No matter what, I'm safe because
Yep.
like we can go out there together, we can measure it, we can do the simple math, and the number changes. My number changes if my time changes or if my amount that I do changes. So
Mhm.
it's okay. Like everyone can get what they want. I'm like, okay, well, we're at 500 square feet now, so we're looking at this cost. If you want to add another 100 square, if you want to do that, it's going to add another 100 square feet. It's going to change the cost by this much. It makes it really easy. So I like that, but I'm also not doing full landscape construction jobs anymore. Like I haven't planted, I haven't mulched, I barely even do excavation work or anything. Like I try to set my jobs up to where I mainly just show up and build because that's the best use of my time and therefore the best use of the client's money as well. So a lot of times we'll sub out excavation or grading or any type of landscaping. Like um, I'll sub that out to other companies and have it
Gotcha.
get done. So yeah,
When you're doing travel jobs, is it mostly time and materials? Because I imagine the location, the type of stone that you're using changes, and that might change your square footage pricing. Is that
a
the
little bit.
case? Yeah.
Yeah, totally situational. I A lot of the travel jobs I've done, the vast majority of them, I've been a subcontractor, so I'm just charging a day
Gotcha.
rate. Um, but I'm usually close enough with whoever's running the job, even in those situations, to like know what they're doing. Like we talk about it, they're very open. We're all open with each other. Like all of us dry stone guys, we're all really open with each other, which is nice. Uh, so like I was kind of talking about with me and Mark, like we have these open, honest discussions. Mark's super open in general with everyone. If anyone asks Mark anything, he's just like an open book, which is awesome. And that's what he was one of those guys I mentioned was just like a really good resource. Uh, so like, and he's not alone in that regard. Um, so some of them have been square footage jobs. A lot of them have been time and materials. Some of the real big ones that we've done in like with teams have been time and materials. It's safe. Um, I don't prefer it because I think it limits. I think if there's a going rate for something, um, you can trust that going rate. and it gives you a chance of making a little bit more money with the client being just as happy. So,
Gotcha.
and if anything, I think sometimes it's even feels better. The client, like I said before, like they know what they're getting. They know if they add a little, it's going to add this much. And, uh, you don't have to even deal with change orders. Like if you have
Mhm.
a square footage price, it's like, it just is. So, but I've done a lot of time and material ones and they are safe. There's a lot of I've listened to some of your podcasts and I've heard a couple where you had uh it sounds like some of these guys are like economists. Like I mean that with like the utmost respect, but I'm like listening to I remember listening to one a couple weeks ago and I was like, what the hell? There's so much there's like formulas for this shit. There's people who've written books about this shit apparently. I have no idea what they're talking about. Like, but like there's like, percentages of like overhead or like percentages of like what you charge for a sub versus like what you pay the sub. And sure, like I'm sure like for people that know those things and follow those things, they can stay safe and make good money. For the people running those jobs with a time and material job, that's great. I don't know anything about that world.
Um, I have three more questions for you, Matt. So feel free to take as little or as much time with these as you want here. Just so I can respect your time here. First one, I might be prying a little bit too much, so feel free to tell me if I am. Uh, have you ever run into a case where you tell your labor rate for time and materials or whatever, or just like a square footage amount for traveling jobs, and they think it like, wow, that's way too high, or you're way too low? And I ask that more so because regionally it can very much like differ, right? So,
Yeah.
have you ever run into that where that's the case?
Um, yes, a couple times. It's been a few years, but I remember the one of the first times I did a travel job and I said my rate and the guy, I'm never gonna name some names, but the guy was just like he just like dropped the F bomb. He was just like and I was like I didn't say anything and I just like waited and he was just like and he just goes, you better be good. And I was just like, okay, good to meet you too. And then like literally by like Wednesday that week, he was like bringing me food and like introducing me to his family and like
Nice.
he was just like he realized that like okay that rate was just fine for and he was making plenty of money off me, so it was all good. But like
Yeah.
yeah, that was I remember those first couple days on that job. That was like 5 years ago, and I was just like very like, oh shit, I better go, I better do well. Like, and it was really tough stone to work with. Like, it was very difficult, very different too. So like that first day, I remember just like took me most of the day to figure out what the hell I was doing, which did not feel good because then by the end of that day, he was just like grumpy. And but by the end of the second day we were good. So
Nice.
and yeah, and a couple other times I've had that where I've had people be like, wow, that's a little pricey. I've never at the end of a stint though, I've never had anyone feel anything but the opposite or satisfied though.
Nice.
I've had people pay me more than I asked, more times than I have had them pay me what I asked. So like in the end of things, I think, you have to know your worth. You have to know what you're capable of doing. If you understand, like let's just say something's $50 a square foot. If and I'm charging and I want $500 a day. Well, I know if I can put out 20 square feet a day of very satisfactory work consistently every damn day, then I know that my $500 is worth it for who's paying me because they can pull 100% profit off of my head, right? And
Right.
those are just some easy numbers to use for that. So
Yeah.
like if you recognize roughly what this person or this business might be charging for this and you make it a priority of yours as a sub to hit certain margins, you're going to succeed and you're uh, you're going to make everyone happy, and you're going to be able to dictate your worth more and more as time goes on.
Definitely.
So I think we all need to regionally. I know a lot of guys in Europe, in the UK specifically, like they are blown away with how much money we can make over here doing this stuff. I don't know how aware or familiar you are with that, but like to them it's crazy. But they also pay like $1,000 a year in healthcare or something for like their entire family. So like there is differences, and I like when we factor it all in, it's all kind of relative. We have massive insurance differences and business licensing differences and all sorts of things. So it is what it is. But I feel like we in our industry and in all the trades industries we have a responsibility to dictate the costs of things and make sure that we aren't scraping by and living paycheck to paycheck. Like that's not what it should be.
Yeah.
So
Uh, two really quick questions. Inspirations, shout outs that you want to give anybody that's helped you. You've already mentioned a couple of names throughout the podcast here, but
yeah,
anybody that you look to that has helped you along the way, both online and offline, that you want to give a shout out to.
yeah. Josh Bowles is a guy that has been very inspiring for me for years. He's is on Instagram. He lives in Australia. His handle is Drystone Jackson. Um, I think he's one of the most talented and cool dudes in our industry. He's a very talented mason as far as online guys. Um, and yeah, it's a couple people who I've learned a lot from that I haven't mentioned tonight. So I mentioned a couple, like my buddy Bryce. It's been a huge part of my career, and another guy is Rob Ferrone, who's like doesn't really have much of an online presence, but I've done a lot of really cool work with him over the last several years. And he's another guy, just like an all-around mason. Like he's worked with cement and mortar as much as he's worked dry stone, and he's insanely talented at all of it.
Mhm.
So those are guys they're like all in their mid 40s, so like 10 years older than me. I really look up to them as like craftsmen.
Awesome. I ask this to every business owner that comes on the show, and it's one thing you know now that you wish you knew from the very beginning. This can be personal related, business related. Take it wherever you want it. But what is one thing you know now that you wish you knew from the very beginning?
I'm gonna just keep it light. I wish I learned to sleep on my back with my arms straight and my hands straight like a board, because that's the best way to keep your arms alive. And learn how to stretch my hip flexors. I wish I learned how to do that too. Yeah.
Beautiful. That's a great way. You did mention one thing throughout the episode that I wanted to just quickly revisit. Stone has always been connected to death. Are you talking like
Mhm.
tombstones, statues to immortalize people? Do you want to expand on that at all as we get to the end?
Sure. Sure. I mean, go through a cemetery, tombstones, um, headstones, mausoleums. I would say most of the what is religion if not an explanation of the afterlife or something like that, and what is every amazing building that's ever been built in stone have to do with it has to do with death or religion, or which is kind of just death anyway. So that's kind of what I meant by that, I guess, is like I think our pursuit in stone is like the ultimate masculine pursuit of death in a way, which is it's like our own little artistic craftsman version of like going to war. It's a very safe version, obviously. You know what I mean? Though it's kind of it touches into that a little bit. So
I thought it was a fitting way to end the episode. And Matt, thank you so much for your time. I've held you up for way longer than I said I would,
no,
but you're an easy person to talk to, and I'd love to have you back on if you'd ever want to come back on. Where can our audience go find out more about you and what you got going on?
just my Instagram is margined mallet. You can follow along there, and I try to just share pictures of rocks and little videos of how to hit them.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt.
Thanks, Mike. Have a good night. All right.
You too. Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. I would highly recommend going to check out Matt Nunn here on Instagram at Margined Mallet and take a look at his beautiful work that he's got going on there. And while you're on Instagram, send me a message at How to Hardscape if you want to learn more about our headquarters software, which will help you budget, estimate job cost, time track, schedule, and train your employees using our installation courses for onboarding purposes or ongoing training, and see all the different features that we have available at hthheadquarters.com. And we want to say thank you to our sponsors.
Cycle CPA. If you're looking for bookkeeping, accounting, CFO services, reach out to Cycle CPA at cyclecpa.com. Let them know How to Hardscape sent you for money off their services there. And Knowledge Tree Consulting. If you're looking for efficiency consultants who have a lot of experience in our industry, check out Knowledge Tree Consulting at knowledgetreeconsulting.com.
And thank you to Mosier for jumping on board to sponsor the How to Hardscape podcast. I just got my hands on a Mosier 2 Pro, and I'll be using it to measure, draw, calculate areas, perimeters, volume, elevations, and lay out the entire project on my device and for estimating and design process. And we look forward to meeting with you next week on the How to Hardscape podcast.